Hey guys, so today I just want to make a quick video. I haven't made one for a while and I'm going to be pretty casual about it because I do not have a lot of time. But I think it's going to feel good to get some content up. So a couple of days ago, someone replied to a comment I'd made a while back and it got me thinking about this again. So 5 months ago, David Powellman and a guy called Ethan had a debate on penal substitutionary atonement. If you don't know what it is, it's a Christian atonement theory, probably the one you're most likely to have heard lots about, where they reason that Jesus paid for our sins by suffering on the cross as a substitute for us paying for our sins because we can't, and so on. So this is the main atonement theory that I have objections to philosophically. So my comment that was replied to read, so there was a quote from a soundbite from the clip. We can think of someone who has to impute a punishment to someone but doesn't want to. I'm guessing that was David Powellman saying that. My question then is, who or what is forcing this situation if not God? And then someone replied, someone called Patrick Barnes replied to my comment just the other day saying, this is one of my problems with PSA as well. When you ask why atonement works this way, the answer invariably imposes external requirements onto God. God can't just forgive sins. God must display his wrath. God needs blood to be shed. It presupposes some cosmic legal code that God is subject to. Now, I posted on my Facebook and got various replies. Maybe I'll read some of those out for so we can get a bit of context, what Christians have to say about this. But before I do that, I want to lay a bit of groundwork. So I have a way some system sounds coming through, like to categorize atonement theories. So I think the main Christian atonement theories fall into, I think it's 3 categories. The penal substitutionary atonement is one category, which is basically, the categories are determined by which objections, where they sit in terms of what type of objections can or can't be run against them. So the substitutionary ones, the basic form of them is, I'm trying to word this in a way that's Christians will be more happy with, because I've got my own way of characterizing it, which a lot of Christians will probably see as a caricature. So I'm trying to find the words which Christians will accept. It's basically the idea of justice needing to be fulfilled. I mean, I can't help but think of it as, God had got his fist up ready to punch somebody. Jesus said, no, you can't. You got to forgive. And he's like, well, my fist is raised now. It's got to get taken out on someone. And so Jesus is like, okay, fine. Punch me. Now, of course, Christians will not characterize it this way. They talk about it in terms of justice. And there's these 2 qualities of justice and compassion. And both of them have to be balanced. They're both important attributes. They talk about things, how we wouldn't want to live in a world where suffering was going on, where bad things were getting done and people weren't being held accountable for their actions. So God having justice is important. Now, I've got so many objections to that, but I'm just trying to accurately represent it. So that's one category. Another category is, I call them metaphysical transformation atonement theories. So this is where they talk about how it's something like, we've got an imperfect human nature, so we can't overcome that. God has a perfect nature, so he can. So the only way for that to happen is for God to come down as a human, do some metaphysical transformation to pave the way for us to all be saved. There's various ways that they cash that out, but that's the basic format. Jesus did something metaphysical on the cross, which created a transformation, and now it's possible for us to be saved. The third category, Christians call it moral influence theory. I prefer to call them bhakti influence theory. Bhakti is the Sanskrit word for devotion. It basically means love for God, a serving devotional mood towards God. And it's the goal of many Eastern traditions, is to develop pure love of God, or bhakti. So I like the term bhakti influence theory. And the idea here is that, in the terms of Christianity, Jesus did something, Jesus's life, teachings, and example, and him suffering on the cross are all sources of inspiration for us to develop bhakti. So by Jesus acting in the way he did and going through the difficulties he did, he instilled a desire to become God conscious in the hearts of his followers and people who were later to become his followers. And this third category is the one I don't actually have any objections to. I think it's consistent with the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, which I follow. Sorry, I should. Now now that I've given that groundwork, yeah, I think I've talked about this on the channel before, but maybe you haven't watched those videos. The penal substitutionary theories. I think one way I can object to this, I usually talk about it in terms of like, well, if God just needs to punish somebody, then he's got an anger problem. But I think another way of talking about it is to really challenge the essential premise of penal substitutionary atonement as an idea in itself. I've been told that in culture at the time when Christianity started, there was a cultural thing there where you could, I don't know if it was people could send their children to be punished instead of them, or there was some stuff like that. I mean, it was a pretty crazy culture. Apparently, parents even had the right to kill their own children. So it was a very crazy culture. So I think some of these ideas could have been born out of that, but I don't want to speculate too much, and I'm not making arguments of that. I'm not trying to do some kind of, what do you call it, genetic fallacy of explaining how the idea arose in order to debunk it. I want to deal with it philosophically, but I think the possibility of why people at the time may have become convinced by these ideas because of already having similar ideas in the culture is worth at least exploring. Maybe someone in the comments can put some more info about that. So if we go after the core idea here, we do that by talking about how really it's not one thing happening of us being forgiven by Jesus paying for our sins. It's actually two things happening. God is choosing to forgive us, and he's choosing to punish Jesus. He could choose to do only one of those things, but for some peculiar reason, he's choosing to do both. And the fact that it's a choice and it involves gratuitous suffering. The punishment of Jesus is gratuitous because God could have not done so. Now I want to pull up some comments. So I'm going to start my screen recording. So let's start with, I think the Facebook actually had some interesting quotes. Okay, so here's the post. I'm going to open the post. All right, so Jonathan Lionheart, he's a good friend. He's been on the channel a few times. He writes that, I don't think this is an external restraint as if justice were a law above God. Rather, the claim of this position would be that God is justice itself. Yeah, he admits that it's pretty complicated. I'll leave that up on the screen. You guys can read it if you want. And then I replied, I think forgiveness and compassion should trump justice, and that justice is a secondary good, so can be strayed from when needed in order to preserve a higher good. Yeah, and so Jonathan Lionheart again writing, yeah, I think this is where the tension lies, because the other side would obviously say justice is a primary good, justice being that everyone gets what they deserve, not just in the punitive sense that sinners get what they deserve, but also in the social justice sense. Children deserve a childhood, that the poor deserve social care, and the oppressed deserve to be liberated. Again, you can pause and read this all if you want. This was the end of our exchange. Well, I don't know, he might reply later, but and then I followed up saying, what I meant to say is that love and doing what elevates is a higher order good that doesn't make evil co-eternal. It just means in some circumstances, justice is used and in others, forgiveness. Transferring the punishment to Jesus isn't even justice. It's just someone suffering for something they didn't do. It's more like a convoluted kind of forgiveness. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. So, is there anything else worth addressing? There were some interesting comments on the YouTube thread, I think. This is more of an internal question, but someone asked, what about our own... Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Here it is. What about our own Hare Krishna theology, wherein the initiating spiritual master receives suffering for the sins of the disciple? So it is described that in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition and other sampradayas from the East have a similar idea that when a guru accepts disciples, they suffer maybe a bad dream, or if they have a lot of disciples, maybe some illness or something. They get some tiny remnants of the karma from the disciples they've taken on. It's described that they take away the karma from the disciples, which is the way the disciple is it's like a boon. That's like a side effect that you come from getting on a spiritual path. Your karma is destroyed, which means it's just part of being on a spiritual path. You get free from that cycle. Of course, you then have to act in a spiritual way to keep that going, to keep on the straight and narrow. But I think that this idea maybe is something similar to what Jesus is doing. And I think of it as also a moral influence or a bhakti influence theory, because for the guru who's taking on disciples, they're motivated to ensure that their disciples are qualified and following nicely so that they don't suffer any reactions from their disciples misbehaving. And the disciple is motivated to follow nicely because of the love and adoration they have for the guru. They don't want the guru to suffer any ill health or any other bad karma that comes from the disciples' bad actions. I think I've addressed enough points here. Yes, so that's like a 15-minute video or something. So yeah, if you enjoy this sort of thing, let me know. Give me some encouragement so I can keep pumping out videos like this. It's hard for me to find time at the moment, but I think I just need to do lower effort videos. And thanks again for the view. I'll catch you in the next one. Hare Krishna.